On the evening of the 13th of April 1979, in the city of Jardim Alvorada in southern Brazil, two brothers were making their way home after a quiet night spent watching television at their sister's house. 21-year-old Jocelino de Mattos and his 13-year-old brother Roberto Carlos had no reason to expect that the short walk back would become anything other than routine. It was roughly 30 minutes before midnight. The streets were dark and the two moved at an unhurried pace through their neighbourhood. It was Roberto who first noticed something odd. A star in the night sky appeared to be keeping pace with them, not fixed in position the way stars normally are, but drifting along in apparent tandem with their movements. He pointed it out to his older brother. Jocelino, not particularly alarmed, dismissed it. Stars sometimes looked like they were moving. It was late and they were tired. He told Roberto to keep walking, but after a few more steps, Jocelino began to sense it too. The light above them wasn't behaving the way a star should. It really did seem to be tracking their position, shifting when they shifted, pausing when they paused. Still, the two kept going, arriving at the corner of the street that would lead them to their house. It was here, at this corner, that something changed. Both brothers began to experience what they would later describe as a strange sensation, a feeling that seemed to override their ability to control their own bodies. Jocelino would recall trying to resist it, trying to force himself to keep walking toward home, but his legs had other ideas. Against his will, they carried him off the main road and into a nearby field. Roberto, seemingly gripped by the same invisible force, followed close behind. The field had been recently ploughed, which made the going difficult. The uneven ground caused them to stumble as they crossed it, but whatever compelled them forward didn't let up. Eventually, they came to a stop beneath a large tree near the centre of the field. Almost as soon as they arrived at this spot, the force holding them seemed to let go. Both brothers dropped to the ground. Looking around, dazed and confused, they could now see the source of the strange light clearly. What had appeared to be a star was in fact a disc-shaped craft, hovering silently several metres above the ground, a short distance away. Despite its solid mechanical appearance, it made no noise whatsoever. As the two lay there trying to make sense of what they were seeing, a voice came from out of nowhere. It didn't seem to originate from any visible speaker or source. It simply filled the air around them, saying, "The job is not ended, we will be back." The next thing either of them knew, they were waking up in the middle of the field. Both had significant difficulty walking. Their legs felt weak and uncooperative, and they had to lean on each other just to stay upright as they made their way back home. When they finally reached their front door, an overwhelming and sudden hunger hit them both. But before they could even get inside, they collapsed against the door, breaking it open as they fell. Their parents and siblings rushed to help them. Once they had been picked up and checked over, Jocelino and Roberto tried to explain what had happened. The strange star, the field, the disc-shaped craft, the voice. Understandably, nobody believed them at first, but when the brothers took their parents outside and pointed to the sky, the strange light was still there, hovering silently above the trees near their home. Faced with this, the family had to concede that something genuinely unusual had taken place. But the strangeness was far from over. As the brothers began to recount the details of their walk, the invisible force, the ploughed field, the tree, both of them started experiencing what felt like a series of electric shocks running through their bodies. The pain was sharp and sudden, and both Jocelino and Roberto believed it was somehow connected to whatever had been aboard the craft they had seen. The shocks intensified, growing stronger and more unbearable, until both brothers were thrown to the ground once again. Their family rushed to help them, but something deeply unsettling happened. Every time a family member tried to touch the brothers to lift them up, they received a jolt, as though Jocelino and Roberto's bodies were electrified. On top of this, neither brother could move, not a hand, not a finger. It was as though they had been paralysed, and both believed the paralysis was deliberate, an effort by whatever had taken them to prevent them from speaking about what had happened. This continued for several agonising minutes. Then the craft moved. The moment it left the area, the paralysis broke. Jocelino and Roberto regained full control of their bodies almost immediately. It's worth noting that several other residents of the neighbourhood also witnessed the strange aerial object that night and reported it independently. But of all the people who saw it, only the two brothers appeared to have been physically affected in the way they described. In the days and weeks that followed, the encounter drew attention, both from local media and from UFO researchers operating in the region. The brothers were asked repeatedly to share their account. Eventually, Jocelino, as the older of the two, agreed to undergo hypnotic regression in an effort to recover whatever memories might have been lost during the missing time in the field. What he described under regression added a far more disturbing dimension to the encounter. Jocelino recalled that when they reached the corner of their street, something began pulling them. He said that both he and Roberto fought against it, but they simply couldn't resist. As the force drew them forward, it felt as though they were walking in slow motion. His heart rate climbed rapidly, and a cold sensation spread through his limbs. Despite all of this, they kept moving until they reached the tree, where both of them collapsed. They remained on the ground for a short time before, Jocelino said, somebody came and caught them, physically lifting them from the ground and into the air. Looking around, he could now see the massive craft up close. A door opened in its exterior, and he was floated inside by what felt like invisible hands. Once inside, two figures, men as far as he could tell, were waiting for him. They gestured for him to follow, and he did. They led him first into a room filled with computers and various devices he didn't recognise. The equipment flashed and hummed, and there appeared to be a command display of some kind among the instruments. From there, they passed into a second area, which Jocelino described as being full of motors, though not motors of any kind he had ever seen. These were machines entirely outside his frame of reference. They continued walking until they arrived in another room lined with screens, each one apparently displaying an image of the Earth. Eventually, they brought him to a room that looked like a hospital. He was told to lie down on what appeared to be an examination table. The two figures took several samples from him, including what he believed to be a sperm sample. After the examination, he was placed in a chair. Strange instruments were attached to his head, and the two figures began speaking to one another in a language he couldn't understand. While this was happening, a woman entered the room. She walked over to where Jocelino sat and, in what he described as an almost mechanical manner, initiated intimate contact with him. When it was over and before she left the room, she said something to him that would stay with him long after. Perhaps the seed will come alive. Following this, Jocelino was told it was time to leave. He was led off the craft and back to the spot in the field where the encounter had begun. Upon arriving at that spot, he became paralysed again. The entities placed him back on the ground in the same position he had been lying in before they had lifted him. Then, without warning, the next thing he was aware of was waking up beside Roberto. The account, disturbing as it is not without parallels. The suggestion of reproductive experimentation, particularly the woman's comment about the seed, feeds into a broader pattern found across abduction cases worldwide, including several strikingly similar encounters reported in Brazil dating back to the late 1950s. This pattern has led a number of researchers to speculate about an alien-human hybridization program, a theory that, while extreme, is one of the most persistent threads running through the abduction phenomenon. Jocelino himself claimed to have received a message from his abductors stating that they were, in his words, for peace. But even taking the account at face value, the secretive and invasive nature of what he described makes that claim difficult to accept without suspicion. In the aftermath, both brothers initially cooperated with media and investigators, but the ridicule that followed their public statements eventually drove them into seclusion. Both became reclusive and were described as deeply disturbed by what they had experienced. The encounter was documented by several UFO researchers, most notably in the book UFO Abduction from Maringa, The Agripo Experiments by Wendell Stevens. It remains one of the more unusual and unsettling accounts to come out of Brazil's long and densely populated history of UFO reports, a case that, whatever one makes of it, continues to raise questions that don't lend themselves to easy answers.